All right, so it's 2:30. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's able to do a lot of interviewing this afternoon. I want to welcome you to our second discussion this afternoon. My name is Stan Hedman. I'm the Executive Director of New York County Defender Services, Public Defender Office here in Manhattan. I'm also the Treasurer of the Chief Defenders Association of New York and the moderator for this panel on hearing from, recent law grads who are now doing public defense work. So you're going to hear from individuals who were in your shoes just, 1 or 2 years ago and are now working as public defenders. And we're going to offer you three pretty different, unique perspectives. We have Gabby Mejias from my office in Manhattan, who's obviously practicing in a very large metropolis. We're also going to hear from Farina Barth, who is practicing in an upstate city. She's in Buffalo. And then finally, we're going to hear from Griffin Dault. Griffin is practicing in rural New York. He's a public defender up in Wayne County, and he's going to talk about what it's like to be a public defender in the rural setting. So I'm going to start with Gabby and just ask to share with the audience, what were your summer experiences before you became a public defender, and kind of what was your career path to get this job?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. It's nice to meet you virtually. So I went to law school out of state. I'm not from New York. I'm actually from the South. I attended Wake Forest University in North Carolina for law school. However, I knew that I wanted to move to New York City. So I really made that my focus when I was searching for summer employment. I knew I wanted to do public interest work, and I knew I wanted to be in New York, which I think was really important for me because I needed to kind of put some ties down in New York. My first summer, I worked for the Legal Aid Society Criminal Defense Practice in Queens. And then my second summer was at New York County Defender Services, where I am now full-time. Additionally, during law school, I did do some internships in North Carolina, got a little bit of the small town experience, public defender's office as well, which I think was really helpful because they both definitely offer different things.
And how about you, Farina? Because I see from your resume that you did not go straight to the public defender's office. So it'd be great if you could share kind of what you did to prepare yourself to become a public defender in Buffalo.
Yes, of course. Thanks for having me. So I, in law school, in my first summer, was at Prisoners Legal Services, which is a civil organization that helps prisoners' rights, that fights for prisoners' rights. And that was an incredible experience and kind of started me off in realizing I wanted to defend people. So after that, my second summer was a law clerk at a private criminal defense firm in Buffalo as well, Harrington and Mahoney. And I kind of helped them out with one big federal trial that they had. So I got to do a little bit of that. And then in law school, I was also a part of the Innocence and Justice Project. So all of that was kind of steering me into the defense realm. And then with the Innocence and Justice Project, it kind of grew organically from there, that the head of the Innocence and Justice Project said to me, if you want to come work for our office, you're welcome to come do that upon graduation. So it was pretty natural and organic. So I went to the firm that the head of the Innocence and Justice Project ran, Vahey Getz, which at the time was Muldoon, Getz, and Reston. And I did criminal defense work for them in Rochester. However, I lived in Buffalo and commuted for about an hour every day back and forth. So that was a commitment, and I love the work, but it was kind of a time problem. So when an opening came up at Legal Aid and they started hiring for the new attorney classes, I applied there and it kind of all fell into place. So it's very different than, and I guess we'll talk about it later, but it's very different than private practice.
Great. So I know Farina went to University of Buffalo School of Law, and I found out yesterday in preparing for this that actually her and Griffin are classmates. So from one Buffalonian to another, let's hear from Griffin.
Yeah, for me, for the summers, I was pretty much always in public defense. I took a cup of coffee to do some private practice after I graduated, just because that was the first place I got hired, and I wanted to get paid at some point. So beggars couldn't be choosers. That's always going to be the case. But my 1L summer, I interned with the Monroe County Public Defender's Office. So Monroe County is Rochester, New York. Then the second summer, I was at the Appellate Division Legal Aid in Buffalo. Something Ms. Patterson helped me set up with in actuality. So then after that, I graduated. I got a job working in private practice, did that for as long as I could tolerate it, frankly. Always with the eye on that I want to go back to do what I had always sort of set out to do. I really love criminal law. I've always loved, I think it's the most important sort of type of law, in all honesty, that maybe constitutional law. I've never much cared about suing people and closing businesses and corporations. Like, I could care about that. I think criminal law is very close to sort of like what binds society together and makes it orderly. It's also very closely tied to constitutional law. So it's always interested me. So I eventually, once I got tired of working in a private practice for about a year, I just started sending out applications every place that I could that was hiring. Eventually, I interviewed with the current office I'm with in Wayne County. I got an offer and I really just jumped on it because Wayne County is directly east of Monroe County. I'm born and raised in Monroe County. So even though it's not technically where I grew up, it's pretty close. So I'm good. I'm close to my family. I get to do what I love. And yeah, it's about that.
Thank you. And I think it's an important lesson that both Farina and Griffin offer, which is, if you're really committed to this work and you're not able to get a public defender job right out of law school, there are a lot of small private criminal defense offices who are very eager to hire young folks out of law school. And if you could find a mentor who could, help you and teach you the ropes for a couple of years before an opening occurs in a PD office, that is certainly a route that you can take. So let's focus on the work, and I want to focus on pre-pandemic times because what's been happening the last 7 months has certainly been an aberration. Although I think we're going to be in this for about at least another 7 months. But it'd be great if you could just talk about what was your typical day like before the pandemic. What kind of cases were you handling, et cetera? So let's start with Farina.
So I would say that Buffalo is fairly in the sense that the public defender's office in Buffalo strictly practices in Buffalo City Court and Buffalo County Court. So we are really tied into one building and we're not traveling out to the towns. And the way that Erie County runs is that they have a contract with both legal aid and then we have an assigned counsel office. So rather than Monroe County, for example, that has the public defender's office and the conflict defender's office for conflicts, we really break down our cases in types of cases that we can handle, as well as jurisdiction. So if you end up working for the Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo, it's really nice that you know exactly what your schedule will be like. So typically, you would come into the office and you would go straight to Buffalo City Court, where you would typically have court every single day. And during those days, you would handle all sorts of cases, whether it's an arraignment, a pretrial conference where defendants and complainants come in to see if they want to prosecute against your client, to a hearing or a trial. So it could be anything on any given day. And we would have court every single day in the morning and afternoon, typically. And then you would, after afternoon court, go to your office and work on motions and any written type of work or client contact. So that's kind of typically what my days consist of. It's obviously hard to kind of juggle all this, but once you get used to it, it's almost strange now not being in court every day. I miss it.
So Griffin, Farina just said that she's confined pretty much to one building.
Yeah, no.
How does that compare to life in Wayne County?
Quite different. Also, court every day. That's no. We don't have court every day. So ours, my office, unlike Farina's, it is just a county office. So we do everything, every indigent defense, right? So we cover all town and village courts. There's about 30 town and village courts. Not 30, there's 30 justices. There's about 18 town and village courts. and there's one county court. We do it by towns, right? So everyone in the office, it has certain towns assigned to them, right? So that's how we determine our caseload. I do something called Lyons, I do Newark, I do Ontario, I do Rose. These are my towns right now. So pretty much any case that is charged there and assigned to our office that isn't a conflict, I'll handle it. Really no matter the level. So, you know, obviously I handle all misdemeanors, sort of through, you know, the end. Any felonies that begin there, only for having a temporary jurisdiction over them, I'll sort of take for them before they get indicted or it's waived to grand jury. It'll then go off to a more senior attorney. As for a typical day, I mean, it depends on the days I have court, you know, and those days will mostly be like the whole day. Court will be long for the whole day. You know, go in there, you do pre-trials, discuss all the events, all the defendants coming in, see if we can't reach any plea dispositions. Then we start calling people. As for any hearings and trials or anything like that, they'll be scheduled on their own independent days, which we'll go out and go to. So while I do have to drive, I'd say the benefit is there that I only go to one place, I handle one court. I'm only there at a court like maybe once or twice a week, and I'm there for a very specific reason. So, you know, moving around ain't so bad, and I've never mind driving, but it's definitely a different animal, I would say. And I would say probably a big thing between me and Farina and Gabby is I deal with a lot of magistrates that are justices that aren't lawyers. So that's a bit different, you know, dealing with lay people that are going to be often your finders of fact and person, you know, you're giving a motion to. So it's sort of difficult to do a 30-30 motion. Not difficult. It's a different approach to do like a 30-30 motion to someone that works, you know, as a plumber and then part-time does a local justice court. You know, they're not going to know a lot of these nuanced things about law. Can't use technical terms. So it's definitely, you know, it's different.
I just want to emphasize that point. People may be thinking, did he say that the plumber is a town justice or village justice? And the answer is yes. In rural jurisdictions, you will find that a lot of the justices are not lawyers. And so definitely that adds a different level and different type of advocacy that you need to bring to the public defender's office.
There's 30 justices, 4 lawyers of those, okay, in my county. So that's the ratio we're dealing with.
Wow. And Gabby, could you talk a bit about like what types of misdemeanors are you handling? What are the charges? And also, have you had an opportunity to conduct a trial?
Absolutely. So I'm currently picking up misdemeanor cases, which can include anything by statute, it's anything punishable by a year or less in jail. And that can range from a lot of things. Petty larceny is an example of a common misdemeanor. We get a lot here in New York. Stealing, you know, a Diet Coke from Dwayne Reed, that would be a petty larceny. We get a lot of misdemeanor assaults, assault in the 3rd degree. Sometimes those can be domestic violence cases, which are prosecuted in a separate part in the criminal court here in New York. And then they can range for things like forcible touchings and sex abuse in the 3rd degree cases, which are prosecuted pretty aggressively here in Manhattan. So they're kind of, even though they're all misdemeanors, there's quite a spectrum of how these cases are prosecuted, treated by the assistant district attorneys, and kind of what your approach might be to a petty larceny or a misdemeanor drug possession case in comparison to a forcible touching case.
And any trial experience, Gabby?
I second sat a trial with a felony attorney. It was a misdemeanor menacing trial. I was able to do the opening statement and a couple cross-examinations of police officer witnesses.
Great. And for those who may not know, in New York State, for a misdemeanor trial, you only get 6 jurors. Whereas for felony, you get a traditional 12 jurors. So that certainly is a difference when you first start practicing. Farina, one of the things we hear about in public defense now, and especially in a lot of offices, is the term holistic, and bringing a holistic approach to public defense. If you could just share with the students what that looks like.
Sure. I think that these days you have to look, and that this is my approach, and I think every lawyer is different. Some people still have the traditional approach, which is I'll come to court, I will fight my client's criminal charges, and that's it. But the more that I realize and the more that I practice, clients have a lot more needs than just their criminal case. And there are even times where, and I've dealt with this fairly recently, that a client says, well, I don't care about that. I care about X, Y, and Z. So for example, I have a client right now who has some drug charges, some felony drug charges pending, and possessing a stolen car. And the defense has been that the car was, he didn't know that it was stolen, basically. And in the process, my client had some money that was taken from him by the police and seized as saying that it was related to his drug charges. Eventually, the federal government came in and seized the money, and now the money is kind of nowhere to be found until we fight that seizure. And so this client's primary concern right now is that he doesn't have the money that was his lawfully, and now he has no housing, and now he is a child who has nowhere to go. He's living couch to couch with an 18-month-old child. And for him, the most important thing right now is having a roof over his head. And so that has taken on kind of the primary approach to helping my client right now, because if he's not focused on his criminal case, and he can't really help me fight his criminal case until we get these things straightened out. So I am a fan of getting social workers involved. We have something called the Courts Program in Buffalo, which is kind of like a centralized place that can help clients get housing, drug treatment, mental health treatment, all of that. So although it's not necessary to fighting the criminal case and eventually a trial, it is right now necessary to address my client's immediate needs. So I make sure that my clients know that although it may not be directly related, if I can help, I will. So something like housing is extremely important. And so I try to put myself in the client's shoes and say, if I didn't have a home to live or a roof over my head, where would I go? And it's extremely scary for other people to have to deal with these issues day in and day out. And having criminal charges lodged against you is no easy feat. So they're facing a lot. And I think that when we look at it, and I guess holistically, meaning we address more than just the criminal case, but we address all factors that are going on and that may be affecting our clients, I think that it ends up being more thorough and trustworthy representation, because our clients trust us more if they see that we're not only fighting in court, but we're fighting outside of court as well.
Absolutely. And Griffin, what has surprised you about being a public defender? What's something that you didn't expect before joining the Wayne County PD?
Well, I mean, I'd kind of go back to the plumber thing. That was definitely the biggest adjustment. I remember one of the first days I was here, I was doing like a bail app for somebody. And one of my other colleagues that was older and had been here for a while was just shadowing me, see how I do. And I remember I'm giving some sort of argument, and I don't know the particular reason why, but I said the word chattel in reference to like a piece of property, like the technical legal term, and they tore me up about that. So that was the most surprising thing about that, coming here specifically, because I had to switch gears. I've either been in law school or I was in private practice. I was at least in Buffalo. We're in front of more lawyer judges, so it was the switching of gears to explaining these things in more layman's terms, for lack of a better thing. So yeah, I'd say definitely that. Something that I might be more relative to all places is just, I suppose I didn't think how hard I'd have to like fight against the stereotype of public defenders in general. People think that I'm just gonna like stand them up and plead them, and like I don't care. And it's like, no, that's not really it's not really my deal. You know, I'm here because I love criminal law and I want to like fight as, you know, as hard as I can for people. So I'd say that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what both of these last two comments speak to is just the complexity of the job, right? I mean, you know, you're a public defender, you're an attorney, you're admitted to the bar, and, you know, first you got to kind of convince the client, you know, that you're a quote unquote legit lawyer,
Real lawyer
who's going to fight with them. And then you get the client and maybe you find yourself dealing with housing and drug addiction issues even before you get to the merits of your case. But I think the one constant theme you will hear is in court, in court, in court. If you want to be a trial lawyer, right? If you want to be in court, you know, that's what you're going to find at a public defender's office. Despite the, I don't know, maybe million lawyers who practice in the United States, only about 5% actually try a case. So this is certainly a very unique group that you would be joining. Gabby, what surprised you? I mean, you had interned at the office. You had spent 2 summers in New York City. So you probably thought, hey, I know what it's all about. But what has surprised you over the last year and a half?
You know, I think looking back on the cases that I've been picking up over this past year, what's surprising is how few cases happen exactly the way cops and prosecutors allege. There is always something more to the story. It doesn't matter whether your client is guilty, whether they're not guilty, whether they admit it to you, whether they don't. There's always something else. There's always some tidbit you find in the discovery and the evidence, some inconsistency, something that doesn't add up. And I think that's why, you know, we're talking about holistic defense. We're talking about connecting with our clients on not just about their criminal case, but and all these other things about their life too, because, you know, we want them to be able to level with us, to talk to us, but they always have a story to tell. You know, one of the things I remember from training, an attorney in our office used to say that your client is the master of the facts. Okay. You're the master of the law, but your client is the master of what happened on whatever alleged incident he or she is being charged with. So I think that has been the most surprising thing so far, is that very few times I pick up a complaint and you know, that's it. That's the whole story. Said and done, plead guilty, end of story. You know, I can think of maybe 1 or 2 cases over the past year that have gone that way. There's always something else.
And Farina, let's go to the other extreme, which is, you know, these are obviously very hard jobs. They're hard emotionally. You have high caseloads. A lot is demanded of you. You're constantly battling with judges, prosecutors, and sometimes even clients. But all that being said, what's been the most difficult thing that you've come across during your first couple of years as a public defender?
I think that so how Buffalo does it is that each attorney is assigned to a judge, to a courtroom, and each judge goes through something called an intake cycle. So it is 1 month where every single person in the city of Buffalo is arrested. They come in before that one judge, and for that 1 month, all of those cases are yours. And we usually go through 2, maybe 3 intake cycles every year. So that's going to be that was my first, you know, year caseload, and that was it. And so I think that very first intake, with new cases coming in every single day, trying to manage all of these humans and their stories and all of the case and the DAs and constant court, it was very overwhelming at first. But luckily, if you go to a public defender's office, I would say that it's amazing having all of these other attorneys around you who are going through the same thing. So you're never really alone, which is great. And once you get the hang of it, it's wonderful, because with every new intake, you learn all these new stories and you learn a new area of law. So managing that caseload in the beginning is difficult. So you got to take care of yourself and kind of take a breather once in a while. But that paired with, you feel like you're working so hard And then you meet the one client who doesn't trust you and says, what are you doing for me? How come you're not fighting hard enough for me? And you know deep down that you are, but usually that's just a building trust issue. So the more practice that you have, the more you'll get your clients to trust you and believe that you're fighting for them. So kind of learning the ropes in the first year was probably the biggest difficulty.
Yeah, I know there's certainly a learning curve. There's a language learning curve. I mean, I remember when I first started, lawyers would throw around terms like ACD and 24020, and it seemed like that there was this code language that they spoke that I had no idea what it was about. And then 6 months later, you find yourself having those same conversations. So Griffin, you have a lot of people here probably thinking, hey, I want the big lights. I want to be in the big city. That's where all the action is. What are the great things about practicing in a rural setting?
I would say our staff is smaller, which in turn means like we're a lot closer. I think we have about 6 other full-time attorneys. There's some part-timers too, but all of us get along really well. And they're, me for being a younger attorney, the greatest part about that is like, I always have someone to ask and they're always willing to help me out with everything. Help me on the law, but also help me on just how to deal with all these other well-known players. I would say that's the advantage. There aren't a bunch of DAs either. There aren't a bunch of judges. We know all the players that are typically involved in this stuff. So I think that can be something that's, it is enjoyable because you can know how to, I'm not like deceiving anybody or not playing anybody, but it's like, how certain approaches will work better for certain people. So having this sort of knowledge database on how to handle, these type of cases with this DA or this sort of case with this judge and how to approach that to get the best advantage. That's something that, I don't think would be available when there's just so many faceless, nameless people. I just don't have that. I deal with a lot of the same people from day to day. And thankfully, especially for my coworkers, we get along incredibly well. I love my coworkers. Certainly could cut the other way if I was someplace and that wasn't the case. It would be a downside. But where I am now, it's the best. It's the best. And plus, I mean, I get paid solid. I get paid pretty good money comparatively to. There's also some job offers for like Monroe County, which is the closest city. Like, I get paid the equivalent of them for doing, I guess my rural work, but it's still, that was a good plus.
Absolutely. I think, quality of life is important. And, it's amazing that a maybe 3rd or 4th year public defender in a rural county can talk about buying a house.
Yeah, well, cost of living.
I can assure you.
Low. Cost of living is low,
Yeah.
The same plot of land I could buy in Wayne County, like how much do you think that would cost in Manhattan? Like, let's do the math.
Yeah, I don't think any of my, 3rd or 4th year lawyers, unfortunately, are buying apartments, at the same time. So, if you have families or, space is important to you, absolutely. I think rural settings have a lot to offer. So we got a few minutes left. All these students are here wanting to know, how do you get a job? So what advice do you have, Gabby, for them in terms of, how to go about landing that first job?
I would just say experience. You can't get enough of it. Take every single opportunity that your school provides you to intern for a different public defender office or intern for a class credit or participate in a clinic, because you will learn something every time you speak to another public defender, every time you step into a courtroom. I think that when I was going through the interviewing process for public defenders offices, most offices wanted to know about my experience. Had I spoken to a client before? Had I interviewed a client before? Had I spoken in court before? And those are things you only get through internships and clinics and stuff like that. So, I would just say, don't let any opportunities pass you by. Even if you think it's something small, shadowing an attorney for the day, shadowing in a different office for a day, whatever it might be, take advantage, because it will be something that will come up in your interviews and that you can talk about as to why you're going to be a good fit for that office.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you to all our panelists. It's 3 o'clock. Our time is up. I will also just give a piece of advice, because I do a lot of hiring and a lot of interviewing in my capacity as an executive director. And don't be afraid to put something different on your resume. Like, I love when I see somebody who highlights, that they were a dancer or that they had this unique travel experience. I love having that conversation with folks. I think a lot of times we just try to steer it all about the law. But I think defenders really, want to hire the person. And it's a lot more than your command of the facts. This is a difficult job. What's your worldly experience? How are you going to connect with our clients? What's your level of empathy? And that's not necessarily always seen through the context of the law, but you all have amazing life experiences. And I just, don't be afraid to put that on your resume, because those are the conversations, quite frankly, that I remember after interviewing a lot of people. And so, yeah, I would just highlight that as well. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. At 3:30, I believe, Lisa, right, that there's another panel where you're going to hear from 3 chief public defenders about what it's like to practice upstate. So you'll get the perspective from the head of the offices from both Western and Northern New York. Other than that, that's it for me. Thank you so much for taking part. Good luck to everyone. Wear your mask, vote on Tuesday, and God bless. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.